Welcome, everybody, to this press conference organized by the Global Forest Coalition and Biomass Action Network of EPN. My name is Reija Mikkola, and I work as coordinator of the Biomass Action Network and will be moderating this press conference today. The expansion of bioenergy at scale poses a significant threat to climate, biodiversity, and local communities. It is not carbon neutral, and incentivizing it takes us off track from the needed emissions reductions and from safeguarding forests. At COP30, the Brazilian presidency pledged to develop two critical roadmaps, one for transitioning away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, and another one for halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. If false solutions, such as burning biomass for energy, biofuels, and BECCS, are not excluded from the transition away from fossil fuels, both roadmaps are bound to fail. On this, we have prepared a briefing with recommendations. We have some copies here for you. Today, we will present some new data revealing just how much countries are relying on bioenergy in their NDCs and what the implications of this are. We will then draw attention to the concerns raised by the scientific community on the carbon accounting loophole of biomass. Then we will continue with the realities that frontline communities face due to the bioenergy industry. As our first speaker, we have Matt Williams, an independent climate and energy expert. The floor is yours, Matt.
Thank you very much. So I'm an independent consultant, and I've been working with RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Our new report, and you can find copies of that around the room, is an analysis of countries' climate plans, their nationally determined contributions, and their long-term strategies. And it looked at how common it is for those plans to mention biomass. It shows that around half of all NDCs mention biomass, bioenergy, or BECCS, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, in some form. And in long-term strategies, which are more detailed versions of those climate plans, 83% of those mention biomass in some way. So overall, across all NDCs and long-term strategies, 65% of them had a mention of biomass, bioenergy, or BECCS in some form, which shows that bioenergy in its different forms is fairly common in parties' climate plans. However, in qualitative terms, we found that most mentions were very vague and had little to no information on how much, or what types of biomass were being used or planned to be used. This assessment of the reliance on biomass is helpful to understand the role in particular of forest bioenergy, which is important because this is one of the largest drivers of forest degradation, especially in the global north. Countries cannot use forest bioenergy at the same time as reducing emissions, spending limited climate finance efficiently, achieving biodiversity synergies, protecting carbon stocks, and ending forest degradation and deforestation. Burning forest bioenergy categorically releases more emissions than fossil fuels. It decreases carbon storage in forests for decades or centuries, and it is classed as instantly carbon neutral when it is definitively not. A small number of the country's climate plans refer to bioenergy with carbon capture and storage as a possible future technology. This doesn't exist yet, and if it did and it was used, it would be extraordinarily expensive. It also wouldn't generate the so-called negative emissions that it promises. The countries mentioning this are Denmark, France, Canada, the UK, the US, and Finland, as well as Australia mentioning it in a separate policy document. These are the countries that give a specific figure for how much BECCS they plan to use, and those 7 countries, for their BECCS plans by 2050, would require up to 95 million hectares of land for energy crops, which is more than double the size of Germany. Relying on energy crops, or wood from forests, for BECCS can undermine biodiversity, land rights, and can place unsustainable pressure on water resources, as well as weaken food security and increase food prices. So while the presidency of the previous COP30 Brazil promoted the bioeconomy, it also initiated the forest roadmap. When the bioeconomy leads to the exploitation of forests for fuel for energy, it comes into conflict with ending deforestation and forest degradation. The roadmap aims to create the enabling conditions for stopping deforestation and forest degradation. The use of forest bioenergy undermines this. And finally, one of the most surprising and promising elements of the analysis of country climate plans was that a number of the countries mentioned biomass in the contexts of those risks to forests. Angola, Congo, Eritrea, Serbia, Liberia, and Uganda all refer to the risks that using bioenergy poses to forest carbon stocks and mention that it drives deforestation. For example, in its climate plan, Serbia specifically acknowledges that the absorption of carbon by forests has declined due to the increasing use of biomass for energy. So there are many countries that don't mention bioenergy and biomass in their climate plans, and even those that do have the opportunity to move away from it or to potentially leapfrog it before ever using it, because using woody biomass for energy is a roadmap to forest destruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Our next speaker is Katja Garson from Stand.earth. She will talk about the root causes of incentivizing of biomass for energy by drawing attention to the recently published open letter to the IPCC from scientists.
Thank you, Reija. So we've just heard about the extent to which governments are planning expansion of bioenergy, and that overall forest bioenergy should not be seen as a climate mitigation solution. And in fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, at no point states that forest bioenergy is carbon neutral. However, the high-level accounting guidelines are currently not fit for purpose in ensuring that the emissions from bioenergy are properly accounted for, in that they currently allow governments to count those emissions actually as zero. The IPCC has previously argued that the CO2 released from burning wood should be left out of energy sector accounting, with the assumption that replanting forests can reabsorb the emissions which are released during harvesting. However, and as Matt also just alluded to, research shows that burning wood or burning wood pellets in a power plant actually emits more CO2 per kilowatt hour of electricity created than burning coal. So the production of biomass electricity immediately adds extra CO2 to the atmosphere for the foreseeable future. And furthermore, studies show that the amount of time that it takes for this released CO2 to be reabsorbed by growing forests can range from several decades, even up to centuries. And we really don't have that time when it comes to taking serious climate action. So what I really wanted to draw attention to now is that earlier this spring, 17 international scientists wrote to the IPCC, pointing out these concerns with the current emissions accounting rules and calling for those rules to be amended. And since that letter was sent by those 17 scientists, more signatures have been added, taking the list of signatures to over 50 scientists from around the world who are all calling for the IPCC to reopen negotiations and to reconsider how these rules are laid out. All of these scientists agree that the accounting rules are at the root of many of the issues that other speakers on the panel alongside me are raising, and that the way in which carbon accounting for forest biomass is currently done is leading to extensive detrimental impacts on the ground, as well as feeding into the concerning commitments to further bioenergy expansion. So as the IPCC moves through the current 7th assessment cycle and into the 8th assessment cycle, these scientists and researchers, as well as civil society, are calling for those carbon accounting rules to urgently be amended. However, responsibility for pushing this issue forward also lies with national governments, so it should not only be seen as the responsibility of the IPCC, although this is very important. However, national governments also have a role to play in calling on the IPCC to take further action. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. Rising demand for biomass is exacerbating conflicts over land, and forest resources, fueling land grabbing and undermining the rights, interests, livelihoods, and cultural heritage of indigenous, tribal, and local communities. By importing biomass, many countries are outsourcing deforestation and forest degradation, since the emissions are accounted for only at the source instead of at the smokestack. Now we will hear from Respati Bayu from Forest Watch Indonesia. He will present data from Indonesia, one of the biggest suppliers of biomass in East Asia.
Thank you, Reija. Hello, everyone. Here I will present about situation in Indonesia. As we know, global energy development shows that Indonesia is not only a nation developing bioenergy, as the entire world is actively involved in this expansion. Currently, bioenergy supplies 55% of world renewable energy, and Indonesia, analysis by Forest Watch Indonesia, we conduct record about 57 energy plantation forests working to produce biomass, especially wood pellet. And during 2021 until 2024, this company concession reached 1.8 million hectares, causing 33,000 deforestation, while leaving 649,000 hectares of natural forest remaining with forest company concession. New spatial analysis that we conduct in 2025, deforestation for biomass production up to 15,000 hectares. Despite the claim that biomass utilization in power plant is clean energy source derived from waste, reality shows Indonesia is actually relies on raw wood materials taken directly from natural forests. The result of spatial analysis that we conduct indicate that in Gorontalo province, that is the biggest province in Indonesia that export, particularly within the BJA group, numerous high conservation value area are threatened by land clearing activity. And according to Forest Watch Indonesia analysis, spatial analysis data, cumulative deforestation in Gorontalo until 2025 reached 59,000 hectares. Concurrently, 10 forest concession permits covering a combined area of 282 hectares are being prepared for bioenergy project in Gorontalo. And also, trade data indicate that Indonesia is among the 3 largest supplier of wood pellets in Southeast Asia, with primary export destination in South Korea and Japan. And facts, Gorontalo is accounted for the largest share of Indonesia wood pellet to Japan and Korea, representing 71% of the country's total wood pellet export. Investigation that we conduct, FAITM suggests that more 80% of wood pellet imported by Japan and South Korea originate from the conversion of natural forests, rather than the plantation sorts. The BJA group was monitored, conducting transshipment outside the authorization of the approval for suitability of marine special utilization activity from the Indonesia government. And special analysis from Forest Watch Indonesia revealed that foreign vessels are answering with the core zone rather than the utilization zone of the proposed Pahuato Regional Marine Protected Area in Gorontalo. Ironically, this area also serves as an octopus harvesting and conservation site for the Bayu Torusiade indigenous community. Also, more recently, wood pellet export also have originated from eastern Indonesia in the North Maluku, which linked with PT Mangole timber producer was concession or encompasses about 14,000 hectares. And according to the 2029 annual forest utilization work plan, indication suggests that the industrial plantation forest utilization business permit operation of PT Mangole timber producer still pose a potential risk of converting natural forests. This is particularly critical given that under Indonesia legislation, especially Law Number 1 of 2014 on the management of coastal area and small island, large-scale industrial activity are explicitly deported in such area. And PT Mangole timber producer also cause significant marine pollution in the North Mangole district. Then the resulting accumulation of drifting wood waste heavily disrupt local activities and pose imminent safety hazard to fishermen navigating this water. And we get 3 conclusions about what happened in Indonesia in the context of biomass. First, Would the biomass energy sourced from Indonesia drive natural forest degradation as production relies on land clearing rather than sustainable plantation harvesting? Second, extensive high conservation value areas are critically compromised with this corporate concession. And finally, third, the utilization of wood biomass generates several adverse impacts, including natural forest degradation, bad impact to local and indigenous people, while operational process within corporate concession are met with widespread labor violation against worker. I think that's all update in Indonesia. Thank you, Reija.
Thank you, Bayu. Next, we will go into a wider context of the human rights impacts of biomass. We have gathered into a briefing, there are a few copies here available, some of the frontline stories from different parts of the world facing serious implications from different parts of the supply chain of biomass. Kwami, Kpondzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Kwami Kpondzo, speaking on behalf of the Global Forest Coalition on the human rights impact of large-scale biomass energy. We are talking about woody biomass, of course. And the woody biomass is sourced from natural forests and monoculture tree plantations, each linked to human rights abuses such as land and water grabbing, dispossession, gender-based impacts, increase of zoonotic diseases, loss of access to clean water, loss of medicinal resources and food, conversion of community and agricultural land, which undermining food security and food sovereignty. So treating woody biomass as a renewable fuel in the drive of defossilize economies has triggered subsidies and incentivized that accelerates demand. So this has created a large global trade in wood pellets and wood chip as commodities. As a result, the biomass supply chain extends from forests and tree plantations to processing facilities that convert the biomass into wood chip or pellets for burning, and finally to the energy generation facility that burns the biomass. So due to this, impacts on people are occurring on the global scale. We also note that the rising demand for biomass exacerbates conflicts over land and forest resources, undermining the rights, interests, livelihoods, and cultural heritage of indigenous, tribal, and local communities. So forests are vital in protecting communities from the worst effects of climate change. So people living on the front line of forest destruction are especially vulnerable, not only to climate impacts, but also to pollution and land use change driven by extractive industries. So biomass manufacturing and combustion facilities are frequently located in economically disadvantaged areas where they further diminish quality of life by releasing dangerous pollutants, which include fine particulates, volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methanol, among others. So numerous studies have shown that exposure to these chemicals can cause serious and long-term health problems, including respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and development disorders. Climate models often rely on large-scale deployment on bioenergy with carbon capture and storage to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees. However, BECCS poses significant threats to human rights because of the vast amount of land it requires. Exactly how much land depends on the type of biomass and the scale of the expected negative emissions, but some scenarios require an area comparable to the size of India. This will create significant competition with agriculture, driving up food prices and compromising people's rights to affordable foods. BECS also presents trade-offs between land and water usage that will dramatically increase the global water demands, worsening water scarcity, and undermining people's rights to clean drinking water. So many examples are documented on the ground, and this briefing has a lot of examples. I will just name a few of them here quickly. So the southeastern United States is the largest manufacturer and exporter of wood pellets globally. So residents in that area have reported an increase in many of health problems, including respiratory illness, heart diseases, premature death, low birth rates, Alzheimer's, kidney, and bladder cancer. So in Brazil, for instance, there are a production approximately of 7 million tons of charcoal each year, primarily using wood from agriculture, eucalyptus plantations. So this industry has driven extensive land grabbing, community conflicts, deforestation, loss of livelihoods, water shortages, and increased use of pesticide and agrotoxin linked to the expansion of plantations. So in Thailand, tension between local communities and biomass operators are escalating due to the growing concern of air pollution and its impacts on public health. And in Ghana, eucalyptus plantation linked to a future construction of a new biomass power station have directly undermined communities' rights. Residents, especially women, travel long distances around the plantations to collect firewood for cooking. The plantations are guarded by the private security. So as I said, the examples are here in the briefing. This briefing was put together by Global Forest Coalition and Environmental Paper Network, and we have a copies, so please feel free to have those copies, and you can check online as well on the website of Global Forest Coalition and EPN. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers. We have now time for some questions.
Good morning. My name is Sasha Middleton from Antigua and Barbuda. Thank you so much for your presentation. What I wanted to know, in like a country like Antigua and Barbuda, where we constantly face increased climate impacts, we are currently going through drought for over 10 years now. We are also a high-income country as well, so because of that, it's very difficult for us to get concessional financing as well to support these type of initiatives. So my question is, do you have any evidence in the Caribbean where it's a similar context in terms of biomass, and how scalable is it for our small island?
Someone have our speakers experience on this area of the world?
Okay, so yeah. So what we realized, I don't have an exact example from Caribbean, but generally where biomass productions or energy production are, it's the similar consequences, okay? Because if there should be a plantation, there should be also chemicals. And if there should be a plantation, there should be also land. So where to get land? From communities. And that land used for agriculture and all those things. So we know that where biomass plantations are, there are similar examples that I just spoke about. Thank you.
I wanted to ask if the environmental impact assessments that's required for these processes, if they don't bring out the threats, the many threats and negativities that you mentioned, and they're showing up in your EIAs. I'm Ruth Spencer, also from Antigua. I work with local community groups.
A lot of the time, the bioenergy that's used receives government subsidies as a low-carbon form of energy, and in order to be eligible for those subsidies, usually bioenergy companies have to provide certificates that show, in the case of woody biomass, that it was harvested in a quote-unquote sustainable way. So those are some of the certification bodies you might be familiar with: FSC, PEFC, and there's also another very common one used by the biomass industry called the Sustainable Biomass Programme. One of the problems with many of these certification schemes that we see is that they have a definition of sustainable forest management that allows the types of impacts and destructive harvesting that we've heard about from the rest of the panel, including clear-cutting, including destructive clear-cutting of forests, even within legally protected areas for nature. So part of the problem here is that so-called sustainable forest management is allowing destruction of forests, especially in global north countries, under the guise of that being good for forests and good for the energy sector and cutting emissions.
Just maybe to add quickly, on the environmental impact assessments, where I come from is just box ticking. You understand? The consultation of communities, there is not a consent from communities exactly. So that's why you see in Ghana, for instance, the plantations are guarded by the private security. Why? Because they are afraid that communities can do bad things. So I think it's very important to have the environmental impact assessment as an effective process, not just a box ticking for investors and government. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's time for us. Do find the roadmaps briefing here. We have a few copies, and also of the human rights briefing and the data that was mentioned on the NDCs. Thank you very much.